The year was 2278, and humanity had finally spread its wings beyond Earth. The colonies on Mars and Europa were thriving, bustling cities built under domes of reinforced steel and glass. Space stations floated in orbit around Jupiter, Saturn, and even Neptune. Humanity was no longer confined to one fragile blue planet. It had become a force to be reckoned with. But out there, beyond the asteroid belt, where the void stretched infinitely black, humanity learned it wasn't alone. The first contact wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't even intentional. A mining vessel near the Kuiper Belt stumbled upon something ancient, a derelict ship drifting silently in the dark. Its design was alien, angular, and covered in strange glyphs that seemed to shimmer and shift when looked at too closely. The miners made the mistake of boarding it, hoping to salvage technology or resources. What they unleashed instead was death. The alien species called themselves the Xal'thar. They weren't explorers. They weren't traders. They were predators, biomechanical monstrosities bred for war. Their ships were living organisms, their weapons fused with flesh and metal. And worst of all, they saw humanity not as equals, but as prey. Within months, the Xal'thar fleet descended upon the outer colonies. Europa fell first, its domes shattered like glass ornaments. Mars held out longer, its military installations putting up a fierce resistance. But it was only a matter of time before the red planet was reduced to rubble. The survivors fled inward, toward Earth, desperate for sanctuary. The United Earth military scrambled to mount a defense, deploying every ship, every soldier, every weapon they had. But the Xal'thar were relentless, adaptive, and utterly merciless. This is where our story begins, with Captain Elias Rourke, a hardened veteran of the UEM. He'd seen his fair share of battles, from pirate skirmishes in the asteroid belt to suppressing insurgencies on Titan, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Rourke commanded the Vanguard, a heavily armed frigate equipped with experimental railguns and plasma cannons. It was fast, deadly, and one of the few ships still operational after the initial Xal'thar assault. Rourke stood on the bridge, staring out at the vastness of space through the reinforced viewport. His crew bustled around him, checking systems, relaying reports, and preparing for what would undoubtedly be their final mission. The orders were clear: hold the line at all costs. Earth couldn't afford to lose any more ground. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sarah Kane, his second in command. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "We've got incoming. 3 Xal'thar cruisers bearing down fast." Rourke clenched his jaw. "Raise shields. Arm all weapons. Let's give these bastards a fight they won't forget." The Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring as it closed the distance to the enemy fleet. The Xal'thar ships were grotesque, pulsating with organic veins that glowed faintly green. Their weapons fired bolts of searing energy, each shot capable of tearing through hull plating like paper. But Rourke wasn't about to back down. "Fire railguns," he barked. The Vanguard's twin railguns unleashed their payload, 2 tungsten slugs traveling at hypersonic speeds. One slug slammed into the nearest Xal'thar cruiser, punching a hole clean through its organic armor. The ship convulsed, its fleshy exterior writhing as it tried to repair itself. The second slug missed, grazing another cruiser and spinning it off course. "Plasma cannons now," Rourke ordered. The Vanguard's plasma cannons erupted in a blaze of blue fire, bathing the Xal'thar ships in superheated energy. One cruiser exploded outright, its biomechanical frame unable to withstand the onslaught. The other 2 regrouped, their weapons firing in unison. The Vanguard shuddered as its shields absorbed the impact, alarms blaring throughout the ship. "We can't take much more of this," Kane shouted. Rourke gritted his teeth. "Divert power to the shields. Keep firing." The battle raged on, a brutal exchange of firepower that left both sides battered and bleeding. The Vanguard managed to destroy another cruiser, but the last one was proving stubborn. It dodged and weaved, its weapons hammering the frigate relentlessly. Rourke knew they couldn't keep this up. The Vanguard was running out of ammunition, and its shields were dangerously close to failing. "Captain," said Ensign Malik, the ship's communications officer, "we're picking up a distress signal. It's coming from Earth." Rourke froze. "Put it through." The signal crackled to life, distorted by interference, but unmistakably human. This is General Marcus Steele of the United Earth Military. We're under heavy attack. Earth's defenses are failing. If anyone can hear this, we need reinforcements. Now. Rourke's heart sank. Earth was their last stand, the cradle of humanity. If it fell, there would be nowhere left to run. He glanced at Kane, who nodded grimly. Set course for Earth, Rourke said. Maximum speed. But Captain, Malek protested, what about the cruiser? Rourke turned to face him, his expression hard as steel. We'll deal with it on the way. Right now, Earth needs us. The Vanguard's engines roared to life, propelling the ship toward its home planet. The remaining Xal'thar cruiser pursued them, firing relentlessly. Rourke and his crew fought back with everything they had, using hit-and-run tactics to keep the enemy at bay. It was a desperate gamble, but they couldn't afford to fail. As they approached Earth, the sight that greeted them was devastating. The planet's orbital defenses were in ruins, debris scattered across the void. Xal'thar ships swarmed like locusts, bombarding cities and military installations alike. Fires raged across the surface, visible even from space. Rourke felt a surge of anger. This was his home, his people, his planet. He wouldn't let these monsters take it. All hands, he said, his voice echoing through the ship. Prepare for the fight of your lives. We're going in. The Vanguard dove into the fray, weaving between enemy ships and firing at anything that moved. Rourke's crew worked tirelessly, their resolve unshaken despite the overwhelming odds. Together, they managed to rally what remained of Earth's fleet, coordinating attacks and exploiting weaknesses in the Xal'thar formations. It was chaos, pure and unrelenting. Ships exploded, debris rained down, and the void was filled with the screams of the dying. But amidst the carnage, humanity fought back. They were stubborn, resourceful, and fiercely determined. For every ship they lost, they took down 2 of the enemies. For every soldier who fell, 10 more rose to take their place. And then, just when it seemed like victory might be within reach, the Xal'thar revealed their trump card. A massive dreadnought emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing every other ship in the battlefield. Its weapons were colossal, capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single shot. It was a nightmare made manifest. Rourke stared at the dreadnought, his mind racing. They couldn't win against that thing, not with conventional tactics. But maybe, just maybe, there was another way. Kane, he said, get me a direct line to General Steele. Moments later, Steele's voice came through the comms. Rourke, what the hell's going on up there? General, Rourke said, I have a plan. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. I'm listening. Rourke explained his idea. A suicide run straight into the dreadnought's core. The Vanguard would overload its reactor, creating a chain reaction that could destroy the enemy ship from within. It was a long shot, but if it worked, it could turn the tide of the battle. Steele was silent for a moment. Then he said, do it, and Godspeed. Rourke turned to his crew. You heard the man. Let's make it count. The Vanguard surged forward, dodging enemy fire as it raced toward the dreadnought. The crew worked together seamlessly, pushing the ship to its limits. Rourke felt a strange sense of calm as they approached their target. This was it, their final stand. As the Vanguard collided with the dreadnought, its reactor overloaded, unleashing a blinding explosion that consumed both ships. The shock wave rippled through the battlefield, destroying nearby Xal'thar vessels and scattering the rest. The tide had turned. Humanity had survived. But the cost was immeasurable. The explosion of the Vanguard was visible even from Earth's surface, a brilliant flash of light that briefly outshone the sun. For those watching from below, it was a moment of both awe and despair. The dreadnought, the massive Xal'thar flagship, was gone. Its remains scattered across the void like ash in the wind. But so too was the Vanguard, along with Captain Elias Rourke and his crew. In the silence that followed, the battlefield seemed to hold its breath. The Xal'thar fleet, once an unstoppable force, faltered. Their hive-like coordination began to break down without the dreadnought at the center of their command structure. Ships drifted aimlessly, some retreating into hyperspace, others turning on each other in confusion. It was as if the death of their flagship had severed a vital nerve, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. On the bridge of the UEM battleship Resolute, General Marcus Steele watched the chaos unfold on the tactical display. His grizzled face, lined with years of war, betrayed no emotion, but his clenched fist told another story. He knew what Rourke and his crew had sacrificed to make this moment possible. "Signal all remaining ships," Steele barked. "Press the attack. Don't let them regroup." Across the battered remnants of Earth's fleet, the order was relayed. Frigates, cruisers, and fighters surged forward, their weapons blazing. The human ships fought with renewed vigor, their desperation replaced by a fierce determination. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for vengeance. The battle raged on for hours, but the tide had definitively turned. One by one, the Xal'thar ships were destroyed or driven back. By the time the last alien vessel retreated into hyperspace, humanity stood victorious. But it was a hollow victory. Earth was in ruins. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble, their populations decimated. The orbital defense grid was shattered, leaving the planet vulnerable to future attacks. And the cost in human lives was staggering. Millions were dead, billions more displaced. The survivors looked up at the night sky, now littered with the debris of countless ships, and wondered if this was truly the end, or just the beginning of something worse. 2 weeks later, in the aftermath of the battle, a small salvage team was dispatched to the wreckage of the Vanguard. The ship's remains had been located drifting near the edge of Earth's gravity well, a twisted mass of metal and carbonized flesh. The mission was simple: recover anything of value, data logs, black box recordings, maybe even fragments of the experimental technology the Vanguard had been equipped with. The team consisted of 6 men and women, all veterans of the United Earth military. They worked in silence, their EVA suits illuminated by the flickering lights of their tools. The wreckage was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears and made you feel like you were being watched. "Anything?" asked Sergeant Cole Anders, the team leader, his voice crackling over the comms. "Not much," replied Corporal Darius Ung, who was sifting through what remained of the bridge. "Most of the systems are fried. Whatever hit this thing, it wasn't pretty." Anders sighed. "Keep looking. Command wants every scrap of intel we can find." As the team continued their search, one of the engineers, Private Elena Vasquez, stumbled upon something unusual. It was a small spherical device, about the size of a grapefruit, embedded in the wreckage. Its surface was smooth and black, almost liquid-like, and it pulsed faintly with a greenish light. Sarge?" Vasquez said, her voice tinged with unease. "You might want to take a look at this." Anders floated over to her position, his helmet light illuminating the strange object. He frowned. "What the hell is that?" "No idea," Vasquez replied. "It doesn't match any known human tech. Could be Xal'thar." Anders hesitated. The last thing they needed was to bring some alien weapon or biohazard back to Earth. But protocol was clear. Anything potentially valuable had to be recovered and analyzed. "Bag it," he said finally. "We'll let the eggheads figure it out." Vasquez carefully detached the sphere from the wreckage and placed it in a containment unit. As she did, the pulsing light grew brighter for a moment, then dimmed again. None of them noticed the faint vibration that rippled through the surrounding debris. Back on Earth, life was slowly beginning to rebuild. Emergency shelters had been set up for the millions of displaced civilians, and relief efforts were underway. The military was stretched thin, patrolling the system for any signs of a Xal'thar return, while also trying to maintain order on the ground. Tensions were high, and morale was low. In a secure laboratory deep beneath the UEM headquarters in New Geneva, the sphere recovered from the Vanguard was being studied. Dr. Amelia Kessler, one of the leading experts in xenotechnology, had been assigned to the project. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with piercing blue eyes and a mind like a scalpel. Kessler stared at the sphere through the reinforced glass of the containment chamber. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The material defied analysis, resisting every attempt to cut, scan, or sample it. And the pulsing light, it wasn't random. It followed a pattern, almost like a heartbeat. "What do you think it is?" asked her assistant, a young researcher named Daniel Park. "I don't know," Kessler admitted, "but whatever it is, it's not inert. This thing is alive, or at least it's functioning." Park frowned. Should we be worried? Kessler didn't answer. Instead, she activated the chamber's scanning array, directing a focused beam of energy at the sphere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sphere began to vibrate, emitting a low hum that resonated through the lab. "Shut it down," Kessler ordered. Park scrambled to comply, but before he could, the sphere emitted a burst of green light. The containment chamber's systems shorted out, sparks flying as alarms blared. Kessler and Park shielded their eyes, but when the light faded, the sphere was gone. In its place stood a figure, a humanoid shape, tall and impossibly thin, its body composed of the same black, liquid-like material as the sphere. Its eyes glowed a piercing green, and it moved with an unnatural grace, as if it were floating rather than walking. Kessler took a step back, her heart pounding. "Security!" she shouted into her comm. The figure tilted its head, as if studying her. Then it spoke, its voice a chilling blend of mechanical tones and organic whispers. "You should not have awakened me." Before Kessler could react, the figure raised one hand, and the room was plunged into darkness. Elsewhere, far beyond the reaches of human space, a Xal'thar broodship stirred. Deep within its core, a signal had been received, a signal that originated from Earth. The broodmother, a massive, pulsating entity fused with the ship itself, opened its many eyes. It had thought the humans defeated, their resistance crushed. But now something had changed. The broodmother let out a low guttural roar, and the broodship began to move. Around it, other ships emerged from the shadows, forming a vast armada. The Xal'thar were coming back, and this time, they wouldn't stop until humanity was wiped from existence. Back on Earth, General Steele stood in the war room, staring at the latest reports. Strange anomalies were being detected across the planet. Power surges, unexplained disappearances, sightings of shadowy figures. And then there was the message, intercepted just hours ago. A single phrase, repeated over and over in an alien language. Steele didn't need a translator to understand its meaning. "They're coming." He turned to the officers gathered around him. "Prepare the defenses. Call in every ship, every soldier, every resource we've got. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." And somewhere in the depths of space, the Xal'thar armada loomed closer, bringing with it the promise of annihilation. Humanity's war for survival was far from over. The war room buzzed with activity as officers scrambled to relay orders, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of urgency. General Steele stood at the center of it all, his weathered face carved from stone. The weight of humanity's survival rested squarely on his shoulders, and he bore it without flinching. "Status report," Steele barked, his voice cutting through the din like a blade. Colonel Harris, his chief tactical officer, stepped forward, datapad in hand. "Sir, our orbital defenses are still offline. Repairs are underway, but it'll take weeks to get them fully operational. Ground forces are stretched thin, and most of our fleet is either damaged or scattered across the system. We're pulling everyone back to Earth, but it'll take time." Steele clenched his fists. Time was the one thing they didn't have. The Xal'thar armada would be here within days, maybe less, and Earth was woefully unprepared. He turned to another officer, a young woman with sharp eyes and a steady demeanor. "Lieutenant Commander Patel, what about the civilian evacuation?" Patel shook her head grimly. "We've managed to relocate about 20% of the population to underground shelters. But there's no way we can move everyone in time. If the Xal'thar hit us full force..." She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Steele exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "Then we hold the line. We fight with everything we've got. If this is the end, we make damn sure they remember us." He turned back to the holographic display dominating the center of the room. It showed the solar system, with Earth highlighted in blue and a growing cluster of red dots representing the incoming Xal'thar fleet. They were still outside the Kuiper Belt, but they were moving fast. "Send out a system-wide broadcast," Steele ordered. "I want every able-bodied man and woman ready to fight. Civilians, miners, engineers. I don't care who they are. If they can hold a weapon, they're soldiers now. And contact the colonies on Ganymede and Callisto. Tell them we need reinforcements, even if it's just a handful of ships." "Yes, sir," Patel said, saluting before rushing off to carry out his orders. As the room erupted into motion once more, Steele allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He thought of Rourke and the crew of the Vanguard, of their sacrifice to buy humanity a fighting chance. He thought of the billions of lives depending on him to make the right decisions. And he thought of the Xal'thar, relentless and alien, bearing down on them like an unstoppable storm. But Steele wasn't the kind of man to break under pressure. If the Xal'thar wanted a war, he'd give them one they'd never forget. Deep beneath the surface of New Geneva, in the shadowy corridors of the UEM research facility, Dr. Amelia Kessler awoke with a start. Her head throbbed, and her vision swam as she tried to piece together what had happened. The last thing she remembered was the sphere, the strange alien artifact, and the figure that had emerged from it. She sat up slowly, wincing as pain lanced through her ribs. The lab was in ruins, equipment shattered and walls scorched. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows across the debris-strewn floor. Of her assistant, Daniel Park, there was no sign. "Park?" she called out, her voice hoarse. No response. Kessler struggled to her feet, leaning against a nearby console for support. Her mind raced. Whatever that figure was, it had escaped, and it was loose somewhere on Earth. She needed to warn someone, anyone, before it was too late. She stumbled toward the exit, only to freeze as a low mechanical hum filled the air. Turning slowly, she saw the figure standing at the far end of the lab, its glowing green eyes fixed on her. It hadn't left after all. "You," Kessler whispered, her voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, its movements unnervingly fluid. When it spoke, its voice echoed with an otherworldly resonance. "You awakened me. Now you must listen." Kessler swallowed hard, her instincts screaming at her to run. But something in the figure's tone gave her pause. It wasn't attacking her. Not yet, anyway. Maybe, just maybe, she could reason with it. "I'm listening," she said cautiously. The figure stepped closer, its liquid-like form rippling with each movement. "Your kind has unleashed forces you cannot comprehend. The Xal'thar are but one threat among many. There are others, greater, older, hungrier. I was created to contain them, to guard against their return. But your interference has weakened the seals." "What seals?" Kessler asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "What are you talking about?" The figure raised one hand, and a series of glowing symbols appeared in the air between them. They were complex, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe as Kessler looked at them. "The barriers between dimensions," the figure explained. "Long ago, my creators locked away entities that would devour entire realities. The Xal'thar served one such entity, a being of endless hunger known as the Voidbringer. Its influence grows stronger with each passing moment. If it awakens, your world will not survive." Kessler's mind reeled. This was beyond anything she'd ever encountered, beyond anything humanity had ever faced. The Xal'thar were terrifying enough, but the idea of something even worse lurking in the shadows. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure's glowing eyes narrowed. "You must fight, but not with weapons alone. Knowledge is your greatest tool. Seek the lost archives of your ancestors. Hidden truths lie buried beneath the sands of Mars, within the ice of Europa, and in the forgotten depths of your own oceans. Only by understanding the past can you hope to shape the future." Before Kessler could respond, the figure began to dissolve, its form breaking apart into streams of green light. Within moments, it was gone, leaving her alone in the ruined lab. She took a deep, shuddering breath, her mind racing. If what the figure said was true, then humanity's war with the Xal'thar was just the beginning. The real battle lay ahead, a battle not just for Earth, but for existence itself. Above the Earth, the first wave of the Xal'thar armada emerged from hyperspace. Their ships blotted out the stars, a living tide of biomechanical horrors. At their center was a new dreadnought, even larger and more menacing than the one destroyed by the Vanguard. Its hull pulsed with a sickly green light, and its weapons bristled with deadly energy. On the bridge of the Resolute, General Steele watched the enemy fleet materialize. His expression was grim, but his resolve was unshaken. "All ships, this is General Steele," he said over the comms. "The Xal'thar are here. This is our moment. This is where we make our stand. For Earth, for humanity, for the future." Across the fleet, captains and crews prepared for battle. Fighters launched from carriers. their engines roaring as they streaked toward the enemy. Ground-based missile batteries locked onto targets, ready to unleash hell. And in the war room, Steele clenched his fists, his gaze fixed on the holographic display. The final battle had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, something ancient stirred. The first wave of Xal'thar ships descended on Earth like a swarm of locusts, their grotesque forms blotting out the stars. Their living hulls pulsed with eerie green veins, and their weapons glowed with unnatural energy. The sight alone was enough to send chills down the spines of even the most hardened soldiers. But humanity didn't flinch. From orbital platforms to ground-based missile batteries, every weapon Earth had left roared to life. Railguns fired tungsten slugs at hypersonic speeds, slicing through Xal'thar cruisers like butter. Plasma cannons unleashed torrents of superheated energy, vaporizing smaller ships in blinding flashes of light. Fighter squadrons darted between enemy vessels, launching volleys of missiles before peeling away in tight, evasive maneuvers. The Resolute led the charge, its massive guns hammering the Xal'thar dreadnought at the center of the fleet. General Steele stood on the bridge, barking orders as his crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship operational. The holographic display showed the battlefield in real time, a chaotic mess of red and blue icons. "Target that cruiser on our starboard side," Steele commanded, "and someone get me a status update on the ground defenses." Colonel Harris responded quickly, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Ground forces are holding, sir. Missile batteries have taken out several enemy landing craft, but we're seeing heavy casualties in the eastern sectors. Civilians are still being evacuated." Steele nodded grimly. "Tell them to hold as long as they can. Every second counts." The Resolute shuddered as a blast from the dreadnought's main cannon slammed into its shields. Alarms blared, and sparks flew from overloaded consoles. Steele gripped the edge of his command chair, his teeth clenched. "Shields down to 40%, shouted Lieutenant Commander Patel. "We can't take another hit like that." "Then don't let them hit us," Steele growled. "Evasive maneuvers, and fire everything we've got at that damn dreadnought." The Resolute banked hard, narrowly avoiding another devastating shot. Its railguns fired in unison, striking the dreadnought's hull and leaving deep scars in its organic armor. But the massive ship barely seemed to notice. It pressed forward, its weapons blazing, determined to crush humanity's last line of defense. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of New Geneva, Dr. Amelia Kessler was racing against time. She'd managed to escape the ruined lab and make her way to a secure communications terminal. Her hands trembled as she typed, sending an urgent message to General Steele. "General, this is Dr. Kessler. I need to speak with you immediately. It's about the Xal'thar, and something far worse." The reply came almost instantly. Steele's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim and focused. "Kessler, what the hell's going on down there?" Kessler took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "I encountered something, an entity that emerged from the artifact we recovered from the Vanguard. It warned me about the Xal'thar, and about a greater threat called the Voidbringer." Steele frowned. "Voidbringer? What are you talking about?" "The Xal'thar aren't just invaders," Kessler explained. "They're servants. They're trying to awaken something ancient, something powerful enough to destroy entire realities. If they succeed, Earth won't just fall, it'll be consumed." Steele's jaw tightened. "Do you have proof?" "No," Kessler admitted, "but the entity said we need to uncover lost knowledge, ancient archives hidden on Mars, Europa, and even here on Earth. There's something buried in our past that could help us stop this." Steele stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, I'll authorize a search team, but right now we've got bigger problems. The Xal'thar fleet is tearing us apart." "I know," Kessler said, "but if we don't find those archives soon, it won't matter how many ships we destroy. The Voidbringer will finish what they started." Steele didn't respond immediately. He glanced off screen, likely receiving updates from his officers, then turned back to Kessler. "Do whatever you have to do. Find those archives, and pray you're right about this." The screen went dark, leaving Kessler alone with her thoughts. She knew the odds were slim, but she couldn't afford to fail. Humanity's survival depended on her finding answers, and fast. Back in orbit, the battle raged on. The Resolute and the remaining UEM fleet fought valiantly, but the Xal'thar dreadnought was proving nearly impossible to kill. Its organic armor regenerated faster than they could damage it, and its weapons tore through human ships with terrifying efficiency. On the ground, things were no better. Xal'thar landing craft had breached several key defensive lines, unleashing swarms of biomechanical soldiers onto the streets of New Geneva. The creatures moved with unnatural speed, their razor-sharp limbs cutting down anyone who stood in their way. Civilians screamed as they fled, while soldiers fought desperately to hold the line. In one of the eastern sectors, Sergeant Cole Anders and his squad were pinned down behind a barricade. Anders fired his rifle at the advancing Xal'thar troops, each shot hitting its mark, but doing little to slow them down. "We're running out of ammo," shouted Private Vasquez, reloading her weapon with shaking hands. "Hold your ground," Anders barked. "We can't let them break through." A deafening roar echoed through the streets as a Xal'thar war beast, a massive, quadrupedal creature with glowing eyes and armored plating, charged toward the barricade. Anders felt his stomach drop. They didn't have the firepower to take down something that big. "Fall back," he ordered. "Get to the secondary position." The squad scrambled to retreat, but the war beast was too fast. It smashed through the barricade, sending debris flying, and lunged at the nearest soldier. Anders watched in horror as the man was torn apart, his screams cut short by the creature's claws. Before the war beast could attack again, a streak of light shot through the air, striking it square in the chest. The creature let out a guttural screech and collapsed, its body convulsing before going still. Anders turned to see a squadron of UEM fighters overhead, their weapons targeting the remaining Xal'thar troops. The airstrike bought them precious seconds to regroup, but Anders knew it wouldn't be enough. The enemy just kept coming. As the battle reached its peak, a sudden surge of energy rippled through the battlefield. Both human and Xal'thar forces paused, momentarily disoriented by the strange phenomenon. In orbit, the dreadnought emitted a low, resonant hum, its glowing veins pulsating more intensely. On the Resolute, General Steele stared at the tactical display, his gut twisting with unease. "What the hell is happening?" Lieutenant Commander Patel's voice was shaky. "Sir, we're detecting a massive energy signature. It's coming from the dreadnought." Before Steele could respond, the dreadnought unleashed a burst of green light that enveloped the battlefield. Ships, soldiers, and civilians alike were caught in the wave, their bodies frozen in place as the light washed over them. And then the void spoke. Its voice echoed across the planet, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of reality. "You are nothing. You are dust. Your existence ends here." Steele felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This was annihilation. "Get me Kessler," he demanded. "Now!" In the depths of the research facility, Kessler felt the void's presence like a weight pressing down on her soul. She knew time was running out. Whatever the Xal'thar were doing, they were close to succeeding, and humanity's only hope lay in uncovering the truth. She activated the facility's deep space scanner, searching for anything that might lead her to the archives the entity had mentioned. As the system hummed to life, a faint signal appeared on the screen, a beacon, broadcasting from the surface of Mars. Kessler's heart raced. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. "General Steele," she said into her comm, "I found something. A signal on Mars. It could be the archive." Steele's voice came through, strained but resolute. "Then go. Take whoever you need. We'll hold the line here as long as we can." Kessler nodded, already making preparations. The battle for Earth was far from over, but the war for humanity's survival was just beginning. Dr. Amelia Kessler wasted no time. She knew the clock was ticking, and every second brought the Xal'thar closer to completing whatever dark ritual they had begun. If this signal on Mars truly led to the archives, the knowledge humanity needed to fight back, then she couldn't afford to hesitate. She commandeered a UEM stealth transport, the Horizon, a sleek black vessel designed for speed and evasion rather than combat. The crew was small but capable. Lieutenant Commander Jonas Ward, a grizzled pilot with nerves of steel, Corporal Darius Ng, an engineer who had survived the Vanguard's wreckage recovery mission, and Private Elena Vasquez, a sharpshooter who had volunteered after barely escaping the carnage in New Geneva. As the Horizon prepared for launch, General Steele's voice came through the comms one last time. Kessler, I don't need to tell you how important this is. If you find anything at all, that can help us stop the Xal'thar or this Voidbringer, you get it back here immediately. Understood? Understood, General, Kessler replied. And Steele, good luck. We'll need more than luck, Steele said grimly before the channel cut out. The Horizon lifted off from Earth's surface, its engines humming as it broke through the atmosphere. Kessler watched the planet shrink behind them, her chest tightening at the sight of the battle raging below. Fires dotted the continents, and flashes of light marked the desperate struggle in orbit. She forced herself to look away. There was nothing she could do for Earth now. Her mission lay ahead. Course is set for Mars, Ward announced from the cockpit. We'll be there in 6 hours if we push the engines. Might want to strap in. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Do it, Kessler said, strapping herself into her seat. The sooner we get there, the better. Back on Earth, the battle was reaching a fever pitch. The Xal'thar dreadnought loomed over the planet like a harbinger of doom, its weapons tearing through human ships with terrifying precision. The Resolute was holding its own, but just barely. Its shields were down to 15%, and half its weapon systems were offline. General Steele stood on the bridge, his face illuminated by the flickering lights of damaged consoles. He barked orders with the intensity of a man who refused to accept defeat, even as the odds stacked higher against him. Redirect power to the forward railguns, he shouted. Target their main cannon and fire everything we've got. The Resolute's remaining railguns fired in unison, sending 2 tungsten slugs hurtling toward the dreadnought. One missed, but the other struck true, slamming into the alien ship's central weapon array. The impact sent a ripple through the dreadnought's organic hull, and for a moment, its main cannon went dark. A cheer erupted on the bridge, but Steele silenced it with a raised hand. Don't celebrate yet. That thing's not dead until I see it in pieces. Colonel Harris approached, his expression grim. Sir, we're receiving reports from the ground. The Xal'thar are deploying something new. Larger units, heavily armored. Our forces are being overwhelmed. Steele clenched his jaw. Then tell them to hold the line. Reinforcements are coming. Harris hesitated. With respect, sir. What reinforcements? Steele didn't answer. He turned back to the tactical display, his mind racing. He needed a miracle, and he needed it now. On board the Horizon, the crew worked in tense silence as the ship sped toward Mars. Kessler sat in the cramped command module, reviewing the data from the beacon. It was faint, almost buried beneath layers of interference. But it was definitely artificial. And old. Very old. What do you think we'll find down there? Vasquez asked, breaking the silence. I don't know, Kessler admitted. But if the entity was right, it'll be something that can help us. Something our ancestors left behind. Glanced up from his console. You really believe that thing? Whatever it was that came out of the sphere? Kessler hesitated. She'd been asking herself the same question ever since the encounter. I don't know if I trust it, she said finally, but I believe it wasn't lying. The Xal'thar aren't acting alone. They're trying to awaken something far worse, and if we don't stop them... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Ward's voice crackled over the intercom. We're approaching Mars, dropping out of FTL in 3, 2, 1. The Horizon shuddered as it exited faster than light travel, the red planet looming large in the viewport. Mars was a stark contrast to Earth, a barren wasteland of rust-colored deserts and jagged canyons. But beneath its surface lay the remnants of humanity's first colonies, abandoned centuries ago when the terraforming project failed. The signal's coming from Olympus Mons, Kessler said, pointing to the massive volcano visible on the horizon, specifically from one of the old research facilities near its base. Ward nodded. Hang tight. I'll get us as close as I can without drawing attention. The Horizon descended toward the Martian surface, its stealth systems engaged. The crew watched nervously as the landscape rushed past below them. The facility came into view, a cluster of domed structures partially buried in the sand, their exteriors weathered by centuries of dust storms. Touchdown in 60 seconds, Ward announced. Keep your weapons ready. No telling what we'll find down there. The ship landed smoothly, its landing gear sinking slightly into the soft Martian soil. The crew donned their helmets and checked their weapons before stepping out into the thin, cold air. Kessler led the way, her heart pounding as they approached the entrance to the facility. The doors were sealed, but quickly hacked the control panel, overriding the ancient security system. The doors groaned open, revealing a dark corridor lined with flickering lights. The air inside was stale but breathable, thanks to the facility's long, dormant life support systems. "Stay sharp," Kessler said, her voice echoing in the silence. "Whatever's in here, it's been waiting a long time." They moved cautiously through the corridors, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls were covered in faded markings, symbols and diagrams that seemed both familiar and alien. Kessler felt a chill as she realized some of the symbols matched those she'd seen in the lab, projected by the entity. "This place gives me the creeps," Vasquez muttered, her rifle sweeping the shadows. "Found something," called out, kneeling beside a console. He powered it up, and the screen flickered to life, displaying lines of ancient code. "It's a database," said. "Looks like it's still intact. Give me a minute to access it." As worked, Kessler's gaze was drawn to a nearby chamber. The door was ajar, and faint green light spilled out from within. She approached cautiously, her breath catching as she stepped inside. The room was dominated by a massive structure, a crystalline obelisk that pulsed with the same green light as the sphere. Symbols danced across its surface, shifting and changing as she watched. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "Kessler," called from the corridor, "you're going to want to see this." She tore her eyes away from the obelisk and hurried back to the console. Pointed to the screen, where lines of translated text scrolled by. "It's a warning," he said, "about the Voidbringer, about the seals, and about something called the catalyst." "What's the catalyst?" Vasquez asked. Shook his head. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's supposed to be the key to stopping the Voidbringer." Kessler's mind raced. The obelisk, the warning, the catalyst. It was all connected. But before she could say anything, the facility shook violently, throwing them off balance. "What the hell was that?" Ward shouted. Checked the console, his face going pale. "We've got company. Xal'thar ships inbound." Kessler's blood ran cold. They weren't alone. "Grab what you can and move," she ordered. "We're not dying here." As the team scrambled to gather the data, the obelisk's light grew brighter, casting eerie shadows across the room, and deep within its crystalline core, something began to stir. The obelisk pulsed with a rhythmic intensity, the green light radiating outward in waves that seemed to hum through the air. Kessler froze for a moment, transfixed by the patterns shifting across its crystalline surface. It wasn't just light, it was information, a language far older than humanity, encoded in pulses and symbols. "Dr. Kessler," Vasquez shouted, snapping her out of her trance. "We've got to move, now!" Kessler tore her gaze away from the obelisk and turned back to the team. Was frantically downloading as much data as he could onto a portable drive, his fingers flying over the console. Ward stood near the entrance, his weapon raised, scanning the corridor for any sign of movement. Vasquez had taken up position beside him, her rifle trained on the shadows. "We don't have time for this," Ward growled. "Those Xal'thar ships are going to be on top of us any second." "I'm almost done," called out, sweat dripping down his brow. "Just a few more seconds." The facility shook again, harder this time. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the lights flickered ominously. A low guttural sound echoed through the corridors, a noise that sent chills racing down their spines. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. "They're here," Vasquez said, her voice tight. Yanked the portable drive from the console and shoved it into his pack. "Got it. Let's go." The team bolted for the exit, their boots pounding against the metal floor. Kessler glanced back at the obelisk one last time, its glow now so bright it illuminated the entire chamber. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something moving within its crystalline depths, a shadow, a shape. But then Ward grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. "Don't stop!" he barked. "Move!" They sprinted down the corridor, the sounds of the Xal'thar growing louder behind them, clicking, chittering, and the wet, organic squelch of their movements reverberated through the walls. The creatures were close, Too close. As they neared the facility's entrance, the first of the Xal'thar appeared. It was a soldier drone, its biomechanical body glistening with alien fluids. Its glowing green eyes locked onto the team, and it let out a shriek that echoed like nails on glass. "Contact!" Vasquez shouted, opening fire. Her rifle spat bursts of plasma, each shot striking the drone and searing through its organic armor. The creature staggered but didn't fall, its limbs twitching as it charged toward them. Ward joined in, his heavier weapon tearing chunks out of the drone's torso. Finally, it collapsed in a heap, its body convulsing before going still. "Keep moving," Ward yelled. "There'll be more." He was right. As they burst out of the facility and into the thin Martian air, more Xal'thar emerged from the surrounding dunes. They moved with terrifying speed, their elongated limbs propelling them forward like predators on the hunt. Some carried weapons fused directly into their bodies, while others relied on razor-sharp claws and teeth. The horizon was just ahead, its engines already humming as it prepared for takeoff. The ship's automated turrets swiveled into position, unleashing suppressive fire on the advancing Xal'thar. Explosions lit up the red landscape, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. "Get to the ship!" Ward shouted, covering their retreat. Vasquez fired in controlled bursts, picking off drones as they closed the distance. Clutched his pack tightly, his face pale as he ran. Kessler stayed close to him, her heart pounding as adrenaline surged through her veins. A Xal'thar war beast, a hulking quadrupedal monstrosity, emerged from the dunes, its armored hide glinting in the sunlight. It let out a deafening roar and charged straight for the horizon, its massive claws digging deep furrows into the ground. "Turrets can't handle that thing," Ward yelled. "Vasquez, hit it with the launcher." Vasquez slung her rifle over her shoulder and pulled a compact rocket launcher from her pack. She dropped to one knee, aimed, and fired. The rocket streaked through the air and struck the warbeast square in the chest, detonating in a fiery explosion. The creature stumbled, its armor cracked and smoking, but it wasn't dead. "Damn it," Vasquez cursed, reloading. The warbeast roared again, its glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. Before it could charge, the ship's main cannon fired, a beam of concentrated energy lancing through the air. The shot struck the warbeast's head, vaporizing it instantly. The massive body collapsed, kicking up a cloud of dust as it hit the ground. "Nice shot!" Ward shouted as they reached the ship. The team scrambled aboard, the hatch sealing shut behind them. Ward jumped into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Strap in! We're getting the hell out of here!" The horizon lifted off, its engines roaring as it ascended into the sky. Below, the Xal'thar swarmed the facility, their grotesque forms spilling into the corridors like an infestation. But the team was already gone, speeding away from Mars and back toward Earth. On board the horizon, the atmosphere was tense. Was hunched over his portable drive, transferring the data to the ship's systems for analysis. Vasquez sat nearby, cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. Ward focused on piloting, his jaw set as he monitored the ship's sensors. Kessler paced the small cabin, her mind racing. The obelisk, the catalyst, the Voidbringer. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite put together. But one thing was clear. Whatever they'd found on Mars was only the beginning. "Got something," said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. Kessler hurried over to his station. "What is it?" Pointed to the screen, where lines of translated text scrolled by. "The catalyst isn't a weapon, it's a being, or maybe an entity. The translation's not perfect, but it sounds like it's some kind of counterbalance to the Voidbringer. Something created to oppose it." "A counterbalance?" Kessler repeated. "You mean, like an equal?" Nodded. "That's what it looks like. But there's more. According to this, the catalyst was hidden away long ago, sealed in a place called the Abyssal Vault. And the coordinates for the vault..." He trailed off, his eyes widening. "What?" Kessler demanded. "Where is it?" Looked up at her, his face pale. "It's on Earth." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. The answer to stopping the Voidbringer wasn't out in the stars. It was buried beneath their own planet. Before anyone could respond, the ship's alarms blared. Ward cursed, his hands flying over the controls. "We've got company! Xal'thar ship's on an intercept course." How the hell did they track us? Vasquez shouted, grabbing her rifle. Kessler's stomach twisted. The Xal'thar weren't just chasing them. They knew what they'd found. And they couldn't afford to let the knowledge of the catalyst fall into enemy hands. Ward, get us back to Earth, Kessler said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Whatever it takes, we have to make it back. Ward nodded grimly. Hold on. This is going to get rough. The horizon banked hard, its engines flaring as it raced toward Earth. Behind them, the Xal'thar ships closed in, their weapons lighting up the void. The chase was on, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The horizon tore through the void, its engines screaming as Ward pushed them to their absolute limit. The Martian dust still clinging to the ship's hull was burned away by the heat of acceleration. Behind them, the Xal'thar ships were gaining ground, or rather gaining space, faster than anyone aboard wanted to admit. They're closing in, Vasquez shouted from her station, her eyes glued to the tactical display. 3 fighters and 1 heavy cruiser. They'll be in firing range in 30 seconds. Ward gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. I'm open to suggestions unless someone here has a secret superweapon stashed in their pack. We can't outrun them, Kessler said, gripping the back of Ward's chair for balance as the ship jolted from a sudden course correction. We have to outthink them. Outthink them? He said, his voice cracking with panic. They've got faster ships, better weapons, and they don't care if they die. What exactly are we supposed to do? Kessler's mind raced. She wasn't a soldier, but she'd spent her life solving problems no one else could. This was just another problem, one with much higher stakes. Her gaze flicked to the navigation console, where the holographic map of the solar system displayed their current trajectory. Can we slingshot around Phobos? She asked suddenly. Ward glanced at her like she'd lost her mind. Phobos? That moon's barely more than a rock. What good is that going to do? It's not about the moon, Kessler said quickly. It's about the debris field. The terraforming projects abandoned there centuries ago left a graveyard of satellites, equipment, and orbital junk. If we can lure the Xal'thar into it, they'll tear themselves apart trying to follow us, Vasquez finished, catching on. A grin spread across her face. I like it. Looked less convinced. And what happens if we tear ourselves apart first? We won't, Ward said, already adjusting their course. Because I'm a damn good pilot. Strap in, everyone. This is gonna get messy. The horizon banked sharply, veering toward Mars's smaller moon. The Xal'thar ships adjusted their trajectory immediately, their glowing green engines flaring as they pursued. The heavy cruiser loomed behind the fighters, its organic hull pulsating with eerie light. It fired a long-range plasma bolt, narrowly missing the horizon as it streaked past. That was too close, yelped, clutching his seat. Quit whining and hold on, Ward snapped, his hands steady on the controls despite the chaos. We're almost there. As they approached Phobos, the debris field came into view. A sprawling cloud of twisted metal and shattered machinery orbiting the moon like a deadly halo. Broken satellites drifted alongside derelict mining rigs and chunks of forgotten infrastructure, all spinning lazily in the microgravity. Entering the field in 5 seconds, Ward announced. Everyone keep your heads down and pray these bastards are as reckless as they look. The horizon plunged into the debris field, weaving between jagged shards of metal and tumbling wreckage. Ward's piloting skills were put to the ultimate test as he maneuvered the ship through the labyrinth of hazards, each turned tighter and more dangerous than the last. Behind them, the Xal'thar fighters followed without hesitation. Their sleek biomechanical designs allowed them to move with terrifying agility. But their pilots, or whatever passed for pilots among the Xal'thar, lacked the precision of their human prey. One fighter clipped a piece of debris, spiraling out of control before exploding in a fiery burst. That's one down, Vasquez cheered, firing the Horizon's rear-mounted turret at another pursuing fighter. Her shot struck true, severing one of the alien ship's wings. The damaged fighter careened into a massive chunk of mining equipment, detonating on impact. 2 down, she shouted, her confidence growing. The third fighter was more cautious, hanging back as it tried to find a clear path through the debris. But the heavy cruiser was undeterred, its bulk smashing through smaller obstacles with brute force. Its weapons fired relentlessly, plasma bolts tearing through the field and forcing Ward to make increasingly desperate maneuvers. This thing's not giving up, Ward growled. If it gets a clean shot, we're toast. Kessler's mind raced. The debris field had thinned out ahead, offering fewer obstacles to slow the cruiser down. They needed something big, something decisive, to take it out. "Ward, head for that mining rig," she said, pointing to a massive structure drifting near the edge of the field. Its skeletal frame was riddled with rust, but its central reactor core remained intact, glowing faintly with residual energy. "You want me to fly straight at it?" Ward asked incredulously. "No," Kessler said. "I want you to fly past it. Vasquez, can you hit that reactor with the launcher?" Vasquez's eyes lit up. "Oh, hell yes." "Then do it," Kessler said. "We'll use the explosion to take out the cruiser." Ward didn't argue. He angled the horizon toward the mining rig, pushing the engines to their limit. The Xal'thar cruiser followed, its weapons firing wildly as it closed the distance. "Steady!" Vasquez muttered, lining up her shot. The launcher rested on her shoulder, its targeting reticle locked onto the reactor core. "Come on, come on!" The horizon skimmed past the mining rig, the cruiser barreling after them. Vasquez fired. The rocket streaked through the air, striking the reactor dead center. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the reactor detonated in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave ripping through the surrounding debris. The Xal'thar cruiser was caught in the blast, its organic hull torn apart by the force of the explosion. Chunks of the ship scattered in all directions, some colliding with the remaining fighter and destroying it as well. The horizon shuddered violently as the shockwave hit, alarms blaring as Ward fought to stabilize the ship. After a few tense moments, the turbulence subsided, and the cabin fell silent, except for the hum of the engines. "Is everyone alive?" Ward asked, his voice strained. "Barely," Ung said, clutching his chest. "But yeah." "Nice shooting, Vasquez," Ward added, glancing over his shoulder. Vasquez smirked. "Told you I liked the launcher." Kessler let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'd survived, barely. But the danger wasn't over yet. Earth was still under siege, and the knowledge they carried might be humanity's only hope. "Ward, how long until we reach Earth?" she asked. "About 4 hours," he replied, "assuming we don't run into any more surprises." "Let's hope we don't," Kessler said, though she knew better than to count on it. She turned her attention to Ung, who was still poring over the data they'd recovered. "Keep digging," she told him. "We need to know everything we can about the catalyst before we land." Ung nodded, his focus returning to the screen. "I'm on it." As the horizon sped toward Earth, Kessler couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The Xal'thar weren't just fighting to destroy humanity. They were fighting to awaken something far worse. And if the catalyst truly was buried on Earth, then the final battle wouldn't be fought in the stars. It would be fought at home. The horizon cut through the void of space, its engines humming with a steady urgency. Inside, the crew worked in tense silence, each member focused on their role as the weight of their mission bore down on them. Earth was only hours away, but the knowledge they carried and the enemy that pursued them made every second feel like an eternity. Kessler sat beside Ung at the console, her eyes scanning the data he'd managed to recover from the Martian archives. The text was fragmented, incomplete, and written in a hybrid of ancient human languages and alien glyphs. But the message was clear enough. The catalyst wasn't just humanity's hope. It was humanity's last chance. "This is insane," Ung muttered, shaking his head as he scrolled through the files. "If I'm reading this right, the catalyst isn't just buried on Earth. It's been there for thousands of years, maybe longer." "How is that possible?" Kessler asked, leaning closer. "Humanity didn't even have advanced civilizations back then." Ung shrugged helplessly. "I don't know, but these records suggest it was hidden deliberately, sealed away by something or someone who knew what the Voidbringer was capable of. It's almost like they were waiting for us to find it." Kessler frowned, her mind racing. If the catalyst had been hidden on Earth for millennia, then it raised questions she couldn't begin to answer. Who had placed it there? Why had they chosen Earth? And how had humanity gone so long without discovering it? "Do we have coordinates?" she asked. Ung nodded, pulling up a map of Earth's surface. A blinking marker appeared over the Pacific Ocean, far from any landmass. "Here, the abyssal vault. It's located deep beneath the ocean floor, near the Mariana Trench." "The Mariana Trench?" Vasquez said from across the cabin, her voice incredulous. You're telling me the key to saving humanity is sitting at the bottom of the deepest, most inhospitable place on the planet? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Ung replied. And if the Xal'thar know about it, which they probably do, they'll be heading there too. Ward let out a low whistle from the cockpit. Well, isn't that just peachy? We've got a death cult of biomechanical nightmares chasing us, and now we get to go diving into the abyss. Great plan, everyone. Kessler ignored him, her focus on the map. How do we access the vault? Is there a key or some kind of mechanism? Ng hesitated. There's something mentioned here, a phrase repeated several times in the text, the seal of aeons. It sounds like it's both a physical object and a kind of code. Without it, the vault can't be opened. Please tell me we have the seal, Vasquez said, her tone edged with frustration. Ng shook his head. No, but the archives mention where it might be. There's a site in Antarctica, an old research station built around a pre-human structure. That's where the seal was last recorded. Antarctica, Ward groaned. So now we're going from Mars to Earth to the bottom of the ocean, with a pit stop at the South Pole? Fantastic. We don't have a choice, Kessler said firmly. If the seal is in Antarctica, we need to retrieve it before the Xal'thar do. Otherwise, the catalyst will stay locked away, and we'll lose everything. Ward sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Fine, but once we hit Earth, we're going to have every Xal'thar ship in the system breathing down our necks. This isn't exactly a stealth operation anymore. We'll figure it out, Kessler said, though she wasn't entirely sure how. Just get us there. As the horizon approached Earth, the scale of the devastation became horrifyingly clear. The planet's orbital defenses were in ruins, their shattered remains drifting aimlessly in space. Fires raged across the continents, visible even from orbit, and massive plumes of smoke choked the atmosphere. The Xal'thar fleet hung above the planet like a swarm of locusts, their ships continuing to rain destruction on the surface below. Ward brought the horizon into a low orbit, keeping the ship's stealth systems engaged as they scanned for a safe landing zone. The tactical display showed clusters of human resistance forces scattered across the globe, desperately holding out against the invaders. But the odds were grim. Picking up a secure UEM signal, Ward said, his fingers dancing over the controls. Looks like General Steele's still kicking. He set up a command center in New Geneva. Patch me through, Kessler said. Ward opened the channel and Steele's face appeared on the comm screen. He looked exhausted, his uniform stained with blood and soot, but his eyes burned with determination. Kessler, he said, his voice rough. You made it. What did you find? A lot, Kessler replied. We recovered data from the Martian archives. The catalyst is real, and it's on Earth, hidden in a place called the Abyssal Vault near the Mariana Trench. But we need something called the Seal of Aeons to open it. We think it's in Antarctica. Steele's expression darkened. Antarctica's a war zone. The Xal'thar have been hitting it hard for days. Whatever's down there, they want it bad. Then we have to get there first, Kessler said. If they find the seal before we do... They won't, Steele interrupted. I'll divert what resources I can to cover your approach. But you'll be on your own once you're on the ground. We can't spare any more troops. We'll manage, Kessler said, though the knot in her stomach tightened. What about the situation here? How much time do we have? Steele glanced off screen, likely receiving updates from his officers. Not much. The Xal'thar are consolidating their forces. They're preparing for something big. I can feel it. Whatever you're planning, make it fast. We will, Kessler promised. Good luck, General. Steele gave a curt nod before the screen went dark. Ward adjusted their course, setting a trajectory for Antarctica. Buckle up, folks. Next stop, the frozen hellscape. The journey to Antarctica was tense, every moment fraught with the possibility of detection. The horizon skimmed the upper atmosphere, avoiding Xal'thar patrols as it descended toward the icy continent. The temperature inside the cabin dropped steadily, frost forming on the windows as they neared their destination. Through the viewport, Kessler could see the sprawling expanse of white below, broken only by jagged mountains and the occasional black scar of exposed rock. The research station came into view, a cluster of domed structures half buried in snow, surrounded by the wreckage of vehicles and equipment. Smoke rose from several points. evidence of recent battles. Looks like we're late to the party, Vasquez said, peering out the window. I'm seeing Xal'thar activity on the ground. Can we land undetected? Kessler asked. Ward frowned. Maybe, but if those things are already inside the station, we're going to have to fight our way through. Then we fight, Kessler said, her voice resolute. We didn't come this far to fail now. The horizon touched down a short distance from the station, its engines cutting out as the crew prepared to disembark. Kessler checked her gear, her hands trembling slightly as she strapped on a lightweight combat pack. She wasn't a soldier, but she'd learned enough in the past few days to know that hesitation would get her killed. Everyone ready? Ward asked, slinging a plasma rifle over his shoulder. Vasquez chambered around in her rifle, her expression grim. Let's do this. Ng swallowed hard, clutching a compact sidearm. Ready as I'll ever be. Kessler took a deep breath, steeling herself. Let's move. The hatch opened and the freezing wind hit them like a wall. Snow swirled around them as they stepped onto the ice, their boots crunching against the frozen ground. In the distance, the station loomed, its damaged structures casting long shadows in the pale light. They moved quickly, staying low as they approached the outer perimeter. The sound of gunfire echoed faintly through the air, mixed with the guttural screeches of the Xal'thar. Whatever was happening inside the station, it wasn't over yet. As they reached the entrance, Vasquez held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. She pointed to a pair of Xal'thar drones patrolling the area, their glowing eyes scanning the snow. I'll take the one on the left, she whispered. Ward, you've got the right. On my mark. The two fired simultaneously, their shots striking the drones with pinpoint accuracy. The creatures collapsed without a sound, their bodies steaming in the cold. Clear, Vasquez said. Let's move. They slipped inside the station, the dim interior lit by flickering emergency lights. The walls were covered in frost, and the air was thick with the metallic tang of blood. The sounds of battle grew louder as they moved deeper into the facility. Kessler's heart pounded as they rounded a corner and came face to face with a scene of carnage. Human soldiers, UEM forces, lay scattered across the floor, their bodies torn apart by Xal'thar claws. The creatures themselves were nowhere to be seen, but the signs of their presence were unmistakable. What the hell happened here? Ung whispered, his voice shaking. No time to wonder, Ward said, stepping over the bodies. Stay sharp. They're still here. They pressed on, following the map Ung had pulled from the archives. The Seal of Aeons was supposed to be housed in a central chamber beneath the station, accessible via an elevator shaft at the heart of the complex. As they reached the shaft, the sound of movement echoed behind them. Vasquez spun around, her rifle raised, as a group of Xal'thar drones emerged from the shadows. Their glowing eyes locked onto the team, and they charged. Contact, Vasquez shouted, opening fire. The corridor erupted into chaos as plasma bolts and alien projectiles filled the air. Kessler ducked behind a console, her ears ringing as the battle raged around her. Ward and Vasquez fought with practiced precision, their shots finding their marks even as the Xal'thar closed in. Iung fumbled with the elevator controls, his hands shaking as he tried to override the lock. Come on, hurry up, Ward shouted, firing at a drone that had leapt onto the ceiling and was crawling toward them. I'm trying, Ung snapped, sweat dripping down his face despite the cold. The elevator doors finally slid open with a hiss, revealing a narrow platform that descended into darkness. It's open! Let's go! The team piled into the elevator, firing a final volley at the advancing Xal'thar before the doors slammed shut. The platform began to descend, the hum of its machinery barely audible over the pounding of their hearts. As the darkness closed in around them, Kessler gripped the edge of the platform, her knuckles white. They were descending into the unknown, chasing a fragment of hope in a world teetering on the brink of annihilation. And somewhere below, in the depths of the station, the Seal of Aeons waited.